Hey yo everyone! Yeah, I know, I'm finally getting around to my worst games of the year video. Unlike some other award shows where they announce them before the year is even over, I like to wait until the year is actually done before making my list. There haven't really been too many bad games this year, but the ones that were bad, woo baby, they are stinkers. I've also sprinkled in some games that were surprisingly controversial. I thought some of these were pretty good, but I guess the internet says otherwise, and that's never wrong. Anyway, this is just my list, some random dude on the internet, so don't take it too seriously. I'm pretty stupid anyway. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. If you hate the video or disagree with my list in any way, leave an angry comment and share the video with your friends so they can all watch it and dunk on me. And if you really want to stick it to me, go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss out on any of my stupid, dumb, obviously wrong takes about gaming. Alright, let's get it. A full disclaimer, I've never played any of the Dragon Age games, so I'm not going to be an expert on this topic, but for some reason, Dragon Age the Veilguard is highly polarizing. God, wouldn't it be nice, to quote the Beach Boys, if fans of a franchise could all just chill out for 2 freaking seconds after a game is revealed? I know this art style isn't the most attractive, but there are some people out there acting like it's freaking Skull Island Rise of Kong. For the most part, it looks like critics really like the game itself, but when you look at the user ratings, the score plummets. There are a ton of 1-star audience reviews, and from what I can tell, it's the longtime fans who have issues with this game. They argue that the writing is atrocious, the dialogue is patronizing, the combat isn't as fun as previous games, and the decisions feel less impactful than before. To be honest, that's about my ceiling on this topic, so if you're a longtime fan and don't like Dragon Age the Veilguard, let me know specifically why in the comments, because I genuinely don't know. I know the art style was a point of contention when the game was first revealed, but I think people are mostly over that now. I think the biggest problem I've seen some people talk about is that the companions lack any sort of moral compass, unlike previous games. For example, everyone seems to support your character, no matter what you do in the game. This makes your companions feel more like a fan club than an actual party. There's no real friction between the different members, no disagreements about what to prioritize or how to move forward in the story. In a vacuum, this probably isn't that big of a deal, but when the history of the franchise is full of diverse, complicated companions, this feels like a big step down. Like I said, I'm not the biggest Dragon Age guy, so I'm just going off what the fans are saying. Hopefully, BioWare is taking this into consideration for their next big game, which is most likely Mass Effect 5. Oh lord, if they think the Dragon Age fans are angry, wait until they see what that rabid fanbase behind Mass Effect is like. Continuing the trend of games that are pretty polarizing, let's talk about Dragon's Dogma 2. For the most part, it looks like people liked it, at least the first half. The graphics are phenomenal, the performance is relatively smooth, and the open world is a big improvement over the older games. Where Dragon's Dogma 2 falls flat is the second half of the game. All of the small problems that you're shown early on are kinda ignored due to the wonder and beauty of the open world, but as you get used to it, Dragon's Dogma 2's problems become more apparent. The quest design isn't as good as before, there are a ton of repetitive encounters, and that relatively smooth performance I mentioned earlier, not actually that smooth. Ironically enough, I've seen some people say that the game feels unfinished, which is the exact opposite of how fans thought the game was going to be. Like, I thought the whole marketing thing for this game was that it's going to be Dragon's Dogma, but the devs actually got to finish it this time. Like I said, I don't think this game is necessarily the worst one on this list, but based on the user reviews, I think we still have to mention it. Sucks, man. The original Dragon's Dogma is pretty beloved, and people were just hoping to get more of it, plus a few quality of life fixes in a sequel. Since Dragon's Dogma 2 sold pretty well, hopefully we can expect a third iteration where they go back to the basics and polish it up to the level the fans deserve. To cap off this weird trilogy of games that are kinda good and kinda bad, I got LEGO Horizon Adventures. Actually, I take it back. I personally think this game is just bad. I know, probably a little sad that I'm going to poo-poo on a kid's game, but LEGO Horizon Adventures is not that great, and our youth deserves better, gosh darn it. Okay, for the positives, the game looks pretty great. The LEGO style is one that almost always looks good, but I think Horizon Adventures might be the best looking to date. And that's about it for the positives. The game is super short, like 6.5 hours short. 6.5 hours, and it costs $60. $60! What, do they have a gun in my back? How could they possibly charge that much for a game with this little content? Besides being pathetically short, the game is ultra repetitive and is lacking any real substance. Obviously, these LEGO games are usually targeted towards younger children, but this is just sad. The level design is it's so boring. Each level feels extremely watered down and simplified. Go to this point here, then go to this area, then backtrack to the first point. I guess it wouldn't be as bad if there were things to discover in the different levels, but there's no real incentive to explore the world or backtrack with new character abilities like in previous LEGO games. There's no cool collectibles or secret platforming areas or puzzles to discover. I mean, you can barely even destroy stuff in the environment, something that has been a staple of LEGO games since forever. I don't know, to me, this just kind of feels like a mediocre game that was hoping to gain some extra traction by being LEGO-fied. It's not a good Horizon game, and it's certainly not a good LEGO game. I'm all for the LEGO genre expanding to other IPs, but this cannot be the end result. Alright, enough fucking around. Time for the real shitters. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League is fucking ass. Warner Bros, are you trying to get me arrested for murder? How did we go from pioneering the superhero genre to all of a sudden being the poster boy for soulless, live service corporate greed? Supposedly, Rocksteady wanted to continue developing critically acclaimed single-player story games, but the executives at Warner Bros. Thought they should be put in charge of making a live service Suicide Squad game instead. I mean, who knew that those skills wouldn't transfer over? Hi, hello, me and everyone else with a brain? To be fair, I guess it kind of makes sense if you run into a wall head first and then think about it. Just because a studio had success with the superhero genre doesn't mean they are instant locks for all superhero games moving forward. Rocksteady was at the top of their class with games that were single player, narrative driven. They have no experience with this type of game, and it clearly shows. The level design in here is so boring and repetitive, and the story never really feels complete. Probably because it was supposed to be continued in future expansions. Actually, let's talk about the story for a minute here. What the fuck is going on? Apparently this is the game that is set in the Arkham universe, not Gotham Knights. Without going into spoilers, this is by far the weakest Arkham game in the franchise. I know it's a superhero game, so you gotta buy into the nonsense sometimes, but Suicide Squad is just ridiculous. There are a million different ways this group of villains could and should have been eliminated by the Justice League. Instead, they're left alive for the dumbest reasons ever, like Green Lantern giving a fucking tour of Metropolis instead of just squashing them instantly. The characters are annoying, and you never really feel like they change or grow much as the story goes on. And then for the actual heroes, if you have any sort of respect for the DC hero gallery, I'd stay as far away from this as possible. The Justice League in here is represented so poorly, and the boss fights against them are honestly pathetic. On the bright side, I do think that the world design is really well done and incredibly detailed. It's beautiful. Unfortunately, you'll barely be able to see it thanks to the atrocious HUD in the game. Ugh, this rant is already way too long, but just know that everything else about this game sucks. Live service elements are doo-doo, gameplay, besides the traversal, is complete ass, and the way they treat the IP is just gross. I mean, the Batman games were great because you felt like you were actually Batman. I don't know what I'm supposed to be feeling when I play Suicide Squad. All I feel is pain and disappointment. I just hate all of this and pray to God that Rocksteady gets to go back to making single player games in the future. Next up we got Foamstars. Do you guys even remember this game? If you don't, I can't blame you. Apparently, it lost over 50% of its player base within the first 2 weeks, and 95% of its player base within the first 2 months. The Square Enix Splatoon mimic got off to a hot start when it launched in February of this year, eclipsing the launch of Helldivers 2. Probably because it launched for free on PlayStation Plus, something that more live service games should do. Cough cough. After people played a couple matches of Foamstars and got the gist of it, they bounced, and I understand why. The game is another live service failure that prioritizes the battle pass and microtransactions over actual gameplay content. I think the aesthetic and base gameplay are fine, but it doesn't really do anything to make you want to keep going back to it. A disappointing single player experience, overpriced cosmetics, and an overall lack of polish makes Foamstars feel like an unfinished game that maybe had potential? I don't know, man. It's cool at first, but it definitely doesn't do anything to keep the player hooked in the long run, which is basically what a live service game is meant to do. As of right now, the game is still going, but Square Enix has said that they're done doing new seasons, so take that as you will. I think it's time some of these big companies realize that in order to make it in the live service genre, you gotta really nail it, cause there is a lot of stiff competition out there. Don't get me wrong, the money is out there, but it's consolidated to the point where basically only a handful of games are successful. Good luck trying to beat out Fortnite. I mean, those f***ers got Godzilla in the game. Okay, South Park Snow Day is just straight up sad. How did we go from a genuinely great Obsidian RPG to a boring, soulless hack and slash adventure? I've only played the Stick of Truth, but based on that game alone, it's clear that it is possible to translate the charm of South Park into a video game format. Unfortunately, Snow Day is as far away from that as possible. The writing is lazy, I don't like this new 3D art style, the jokes suck, and the gameplay is subpar at best. Come on, if you're not gonna nail the jokes, you at least gotta give us our spoonful of sugar with some decent gameplay. There's some interesting mechanics, like the roguelite aspect of it, but the overall experience is just kinda meh. Like, it's just not up to the same quality you'd expect from a South Park game. It honestly kind of feels like a fan-made game where they did their best to recreate some of that Matt Stone and Trey Parker magic, but ultimately fell way short. Here we go again. XDefiant is a game that I genuinely had fun with when it first launched, but just like Foamstars, it lacked any real staying power. The Ubisoft live service first-person shooter had a pretty decent launch, so much so that an executive producer came right out and said that despite the diminishing player counts, the game wasn't dying and it would be getting continuous support. In all seriousness, I am kind of bummed out to see XDefiant get the axe. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm definitely part of the problem. I only played it for like a month before forgetting about it entirely, but still, the game had some cool aspects. It was kind of like a hero shooter mixed with Call of Duty. Like, instead of players picking a hero, they could choose a faction with unique abilities, and each faction was based on a Ubisoft franchise. It was a nice little twist on the first-person shooter genre. The gameplay was solid, the gunplay felt good, and the map design was pretty sweet. Unfortunately, none of that really mattered too much because the game failed to have any lasting impact with its community. I know I just gave it some praise, but XDefiant was far from perfect. It had its fair share of bugs and server issues, plus the hit detection and time to kill felt all over the place. Since the game was a free-to-play live service game, you knew there had to be some microtransaction bullshit in there somewhere, and yep, this thing is chock full of them. It's not the most egregious thing Ubisoft has put out this year, which is really damning for Ubisoft, but it certainly deserves its spot on this list. On the bright side, any gamers who bought the Ultimate Founders Pack can get a full refund before the game shuts down in June of 2025. Sucks it didn't work out, man, just another waste of resources on a doomed live service game. Rest in peace, XDefiant. Alright, I haven't played Funko Fusion, and honestly, sounds like I dodged a bullet. In a world that celebrates pop culture, Funko Fusion sounds like it should have been a home run. Instead, it's a lazily thrown together mess of familiar franchises that hopes to win you over with nostalgia and the charm of seeing a ton of recognizable IPs all in one game. Yeah, it's super cool seeing the Funko-fied versions of all of these beloved characters, but that magic dissipates pretty quickly once you actually start to play the game. First of all, it's broken as hell. There are a lot of performance issues in here. If you can ignore the consistent hiccups, then you're going to be thrown into some boring ass level design with simple puzzles and confusing mission objectives. Congrats, that's the game. Everything else is uber repetitive from here on out. You basically just explore the same areas over and over again except with different objectives. These are some nasty gameplay objectives also, like escort missions. When you're done trudging your way through those, you're rewarded with some boss fights that are apparently god-awful, buggy, repetitive, and super time-consuming. They're not very creative, and they don't really do anything cool with the IP they're adapting. And if you're a fan of these franchises, oofta. They kinda pay respect to the source material, but the game mostly just hops around between different storylines and characters, resulting in a game that feels disconnected and honestly kinda Frankensteined. It's essentially just an amalgamation of all of your favorite franchises disguised as a video game. Look, I like the idea of a game like this, but it's clear that Funko Fusion does not live up to its full potential. I was hoping this would be a Lego-style game but set in the world of Funko Pops. Instead, it feels like a hollow cash grab attempting to leech off the success of the licensed IPs. I don't know what the developers were smoking when making this, but I kinda wanna try a hit of it. Okay guys, be real with me here. Did any of you know that this thing even existed? Champions Tactics Grimoria Chronicles. Whoa, I just said that name for the first time out loud and my furniture started to float.
What happens to your furniture, cuz?
Anyway, Chronicles is a PC strategy game that is basically an NFT machine made by You guessed it, Ubisoft. Oh god, they're making games that are just NFTs now, Father forgive them. Grimoria Chronicles just seemingly released pretty quietly without any real marketing or reviews anywhere to be found. The game consists of a bunch of champions who are used in strategizing a team to defeat your opponent and rank up. Each champion has their own special abilities and weaknesses, which makes creating the perfect lineup important. Honestly, it doesn't sound like that bad of an idea for a game. It's when we get into the NFT bullshit that this thing really goes off the rails. The champions in the game are acquired by purchasing them through the game's marketplace. You can either buy them with stone cold cash, or you can use cryptocurrency. Oh my god, we are devolving as an industry, aren't we? The NFTs in here are crazy, with prices ranging from $7 all the way to $63,000. I'm sure Ubisoft is trying to spin this all as optional or something about how the NFTs are actually a great investment for the players. Let me tell you something. The next time a microtransaction or NFT is made for the players and not the company will be the first time. Now, maybe some people just want to play the game without having to buy additional champions, which obviously isn't good for Ubisoft, so they had to add an incentive to the marketplace. Every time you obtain a new champion, your in-game status increases, which allows you to gain more XP and in-game currency after each match. Dude, this is pathetic, even by Ubisoft standards. I mean, this sucks, man. I've seen people say the game actually has some decent mechanics, but it'll never reach its full potential because of all of this unnecessary bullshit. Just like everything else Ubisoft seems to put out these days, I'm sure this thing will be shut down soon enough anyway. Let's see, what do we got next here? Oh, would you look at that? Skull and Bones, another hit from terrible games enthusiast Ubisoft. Honestly, I'm just glad Ubisoft finally shit this thing out. It's been about 6 months away since like 2018. Surely, after all those years of development, the game is as great as it can possibly be, right? I mean, at some point, you just gotta know when to abandon ship, Ubisoft. No pun intended. Someone at this company has gotta Google the sunk cost fallacy. When Ubisoft initially announced Skull and Bones, it sounded like a slam dunk. A live service multiplayer game that focuses solely on the buccaneering aspect of Assassin's Creed Black Flag. Those game mechanics, plus Ubisoft's seemingly unlimited budget to support it, should ensure this game can be a powerhouse for years and years to come. How'd the game do? Well, let me see here, I can check. Oh wait, I already know. It's ass! If you ask me, Skull and Bones is about 5 years too late, if not more. This thing should have dropped closer to the release of Black Flag if they truly wanted to live off the hype of that game. Everything that Skull and Bones does has already been replicated in other games, such as Sea of Thieves. At its best, Skull and Bones is a half-baked game that gives the impression it's worth $40, or in some cases, even more, since apparently this is the industry's first quadruple A game. The visuals are breathtaking, and if you just wanted to play a game for its atmosphere, then sure, Skull and Bones is a decent experience. If you want anything more out of it, then you're probably going to be disappointed. Like all live service games, Skull and Bones is packed with microtransactions. I guess some of the character cosmetics are cool, but your main concern is your ship. Your ship is essentially an extension of yourself, which is unfortunate because the amount of customization available for it is kind of limited. You can't change the layout or upgrade certain things that should be upgradable, like extra cannons. When you're not aimlessly sailing around the ocean, you can take part in some actual pirating on land. This might be the most disappointing part of it all. You're limited to where you can port, and once you do, everything kind of feels the same as every other island. You walk around, you loot, you talk to an NPC, and then you leave. There's not really any exploration or need to get lost in an island jungle. Everything that's available to loot is basically right there on shore, so there's no incentive to stay at any one location and explore. Just port, loot, leave. Actually, I take it back. The worst part of this game is the naval combat, the thing that everyone is looking forward to. All you do is float around in a circle, firing cannons, and then when your enemy is at low enough health, you can board them. Except this isn't like Sea of Thieves where you have full control over your character. No, of course not. In Skull and Bones, you have to watch the same cutscene every time you try to board an enemy ship. Once you board, you grab all the loot you can and then jump back to your ship. That's it. You can't even steal other ships. You can't steal other pirate ships in a pirate game. I want to say I'm disappointed in this, but let's be real. We all knew this was going to be a disaster. Hey, whoever's in charge of greenlighting Ubisoft games, it might be time for you to get a real job, like starting an OnlyFans or something, because clearly this ain't working. Alright, last and certainly least, let's talk about Concord. I mean, What else can I say that hasn't already been said? I don't want to just beat a dead horse off, or however that saying goes. Concord came and went like a blip in this modern era of live service games. I mean, this list has a bunch of failed live service games from this year. All of them were deemed commercial flops and panned by critics, but only one of them was shut down after 5 days. What was supposed to be PlayStation's prized first-party live service title ended up becoming one of the most disastrous video game projects of all time. Reports say that Sony spent $400 million on the game and 8 years of development. I mean, I guess I believe it. If Sony actually started this thing 8 years ago, then development would have began right when Overwatch and the whole hero shooter genre was first picking up speed. Honestly, I think that if this game would have had a smoother production and didn't have to deal with delays and revisions, then maybe it would have worked out? Or at least not have been the colossal failure it ended up becoming. Developing a game for so long that you completely miss your window of opportunity. Where have I seen that before? By God, that's Ubisoft music! Concord, at its core, isn't the worst thing ever. In fact, I think the gameplay is actually pretty solid, if not a bit uninspired. The problem is that no one knew what this was. The marketing for Concord was abysmal, so much so that a lot of people didn't even know it was coming out until it was already released. And the numbers certainly back that up. According to SteamDB, the game never eclipsed more than 700 concurrent players. 700! $400 million and 8 years of development to not even crack 1,000 players on Steam. I cannot emphasize enough how badly this launch went. It was so bad that Sony didn't even try to save it. Instead of letting it play out, they just completely shut it down. That's right, the $400 million game was so bad that Sony would rather scrub it from the internet than allow the dozens of people who actually bought the game enjoy it. You can tell that PlayStation really wanted this game to succeed. The cinematics look incredible. The game does appear to have a lot of money put into it, and it even has its own dedicated episode of Secret Level. I've said it before and I'll say it again, in a world where games with absolutely horrific launches are somehow able to rebound, I would have liked to have seen how this Concord saga would have played out. Who knows, maybe it would have been able to redeem itself. Probably not, but I guess we'll never know for sure. However, this wasn't all for nothing. You see, fate destroyed Concord for a reason. Its failure has discouraged PlayStation from pursuing future live service games, so in the end, maybe Concord was alright after all. Really quick, before we wrap things up, I got a dishonorable mention. Borderlands, the movie. I mean, come on man. The era of bad video game adaptations is supposed to be over. Get your shit together, Gearbox. This is barely a Borderlands movie. Honestly, it's barely a movie at all. It's just a bunch of big name actors who clearly have not played any of the Borderlands games and are just there for the paycheck. I think everyone who worked on this movie should serve jail time. The casting is terrible, they act nothing like their video game counterparts, the source material in general is just loosely adapted, and the writing, I don't even want to talk about it. Even with a perfect cast, there's no way this movie would have resonated with Borderlands fans. The franchise is known for its over-the-top, stylized world that is full of goofy characters and action. They should have made it animated, keeping the cel-shaded art style, and just gone all in on the wackiness. This movie clearly wasn't made for Borderlands fans, and it doesn't do enough to stick out to general audiences, so I have no fucking clue who this film was for. Anyway, that's my list for the worst games of 2024. What'd you guys think? Did I poo-poo on one of your favorite games of the year? If I did, I'm sorry, but that game probably sucks. A lot. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to check out my best games of the year list. That one is far more positive. I appreciate all of you for sticking around to the end. If you enjoyed the video or hated the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. It means a lot. I appreciate you guys as always, and I'll catch you on the next one.